Few quick disclaimers. One, it was hard to pick just 5. I mean, that's pretty hard. Just narrow it down to 5. Not an easy task. But I did. And I'll give a few honorable mentions. I mean, first of all, if I wanted to go obvious, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Bobart, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema. Those are some obvious ones. They did not make my top 5. I wanted to do a little maybe less apparent on the nose ones, but they got to get some runner-up shout-outs nonetheless. Nancy Pelosi. If the year was 2020 and not 2022, Nancy Pelosi would have made the top 5, largely due to her being the so-called queen of the resistance, yet she did nothing in regards to stopping Trump, even when she could have. That last Supreme Court pick, she could have used every stall bill tactic in the book. She could have threatened a government shutdown. She could have used the bully pulpit of public opinion and said, we're having an election in a few months. The guy who we just impeached should not be able to appoint a Supreme Court pick. We should let the voters decide with the election in a few months. She did none of those things. None of them. She promised to use every arrow in her quiver. She did not shoot any arrows. She is the anti-Robin Hood. No arrows were used, and she robs from the poor to give to the rich. So she would have made the top 5 if it was 2020, but it's 2022. So here, in no particular order, are my top 5 political turkeys of this year of our Lord 2022. Okay, so first, I'm just going to go in order where I have these, but I am going to skip around. Number 1, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz out in Florida. Now, Matt Gaetz is like if a Taco Bell rapper fucked an STD. And he has the politics and the personality to go along with it. Now, we can start with the moral component of Matt Gaetz being accused of having sex with a minor and trafficking minors across state lines. He is accused of both of those things. Nothing's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt yet. Personally, he strikes me as somebody who is likely guilty. But again, that's just kind of my personal assessment of it through listening and making a decision. That's not actual evidence. So, we'll say we'll go with alleged to be journalistically on the up here. But let's put that aside. Or just, it's been mentioned. Matt Gaetz is the newest face of the so-called right-wing populism movement. Now, right-wing populism in and of itself is an oxymoron. It's not really a thing. It's because populism as a concept has been completely hijacked and bastardized. But Matt Gaetz is giving people this illusion that he is somehow bucking his party and somehow going against big business due to some of the rhetoric that he spouts. And he's kind of the new face of this movement, so to speak, in the Republican Party. This is a complete joke. This guy has never stood up to big business in any meaningful way, policy-wise. And here's the big one. He's against the minimum wage. The guy's against the minimum wage. Only in the United States, literally only in the United States, could somebody who is vocally against the minimum wage make the case that he's also for working people. And there are some people out there desperate enough to actually believe it. Only in the United States, where you have 2 Wall Street sponsored parties, Wall Street Team R and Wall Street Team D, could something like that happen. So Matt Gaetz, in carrying on this complete nonsense facade, we need to just eliminate the whole term right-wing populism. It's not real, and he's a big face of that. So Matt Gaetz makes my top 5. Next one in my top 5. Now, this might be a little bit of a, really, Ron? That made your top 5? Yes, and I'll explain why. Pete Buttigieg. Now, you might be thinking, gee, Ron, I'm no fan of Pete Buttigieg, but that's a kind of random choice. I mean, he hasn't really been showing up much of anywhere this year. Exactly. He's the Secretary of Transportation. And where has he been? Frickin' nowhere. Our supply chains are still a frickin' trade wreck. Where's Pete Buttigieg been? Now, I know you're probably thinking, gee, I figured his experience being mayor of a small town in Indiana would have made him completely qualified for Secretary of Transportation, but it's not working out so great. Color me shocked. And also, speaking of the silence of Pete Buttigieg, where has he been in regards to this rail strike? Where has he been when truck drivers and cement workers were striking in Seattle and Teamsters and truck drivers were striking in Massachusetts? Where has Pete Buttigieg been politically on any of this? He's been completely absent, or we know where he's been. He's probably been on the wrong side of a picket line. But here's the main reason. The main reason why Pete Buttigieg made my top 5. Pete Buttigieg put forward an idea. He wants to privatize all of our roads in a means-tested way, privatize all of our roads and make them all toll roads. Now, this would cripple the working class. This would cripple logistics. Touring performers like me would be completely screwed. This is literal definitional fascism, because it's literally marrying the corporation and the state, taking all of our roads, handing them over to corporate private entities, and allowing them to profit off of it. And what do you think? You think they're going to put all our tolls back into the road? Spoiler alert, they wouldn't. So that's Pete Buttigieg's plan. And that's why he makes the top 5. You know how Obama put a nice, happy, smiley face on Reaganism? Pete Buttigieg would put a nice, happy, smiley face on an Ayn Rand dystopian hellscape. So that's why he makes the top 5. Next on the list, Chuck Schumer. In the year 2022, Chuck Schumer manages to successfully look like a narc at a 1920s jazz club. I'm going to bust these musicians for the pot if it's the last thing I do. But why did Chuck Schumer really make my top 5 this year? Well, Chuck Schumer, being in charge of the Senate, has stalled on bringing 2 prominent antitrust bills, to a vote. He has stalled for months and months and months. It's a campaign that I'm personally a part of, and it is stalling these antitrust bills that will start reining in big tech, which in turn is stopping other antitrust legislation as well, because it's not front and center on people's minds. And he's done his part installing the FCC pick, Biden's FCC pick. Why is he doing all this? These antitrust bills have strong bipartisan support. They'd be a win with voters. Why is Chuck stalling all this? Well, because he has a daughter who works at Amazon and another one who works at Meta, which is Facebook, and they're lobbyists. He has tons of conflicts of interest with big tech, and that is why he makes my top 5. Joe Biden. First of all, Joe Biden is the president. And I'm pretty sure there's at least 2 days a week where he himself does realize that. Joe Biden has pretty much fallen short on all of his weak and meager promises. He did nothing in regards to a minimum wage. He expanded fracking where he said he wouldn't. He passed an infrastructure bill that was crumbs with multiple poison pills. He couldn't even get his FCC appointee approved, largely because he didn't care. He had this crumbs of a student loan forgiveness package that was set up to fail in court and has since failed in court. He did all this while handing a blank check to Ukraine and counting. He has downplayed a public health crisis for political gain. Now, of course, the last guy did that too. But once again, Joe Biden is president right now, not Donald Trump. If you watch too much MSNBC, you might not know that, but Joe Biden is, in fact, the president. Joe Biden failed his way into the presidency, and it really freaking shows. And we are in a contemporary moment where our climate is collapsing, and we have Rip Van Winkle meets a parking ticket in charge. So Joe Biden, definitely making top 5 with flying colors. Last on my top 5 political turkeys of 2022, and this is last but certainly not least, Ron DeSantis. Those of you who hear me here on Status Coup, you know that I consider Ron DeSantis the most dangerous person in American politics. And you think, gee, Ron, he kind of has the presentation of Frankenstein and he speaks kind of boring. Is he really that dangerous? Yes, You know why? Because he puts a reasonable spin and a reasonable face on horrible, atrocious policies that are literally trying to exterminate groups of people. Oh, and by the way, he has some people convinced he's some sort of free speech edgelord. Meanwhile, he's trying to outlaw protesting. This is who Ron DeSantis is. He is a theocratic fascist, but he is a competent one. And he is on the hunt for power, folks. And if that guy gets near the White House, wow. You think Bush was bad? You think Trump was bad? Ron DeSantis? Wow. If Ron DeSantis becomes president in 2024, just buckle in to a plane seat that's flying to a destination that isn't the United States, but they're going to let you stay there. Just kidding, sort of, not really. So there is my top 5 political turkeys of 2022. We got Joe Biden, we got Chuck Schumer, we got Matt Gaetz, we got Pete Buttigieg, and we got Ron DeSantis. Now, some of you who still subscribe to some of the Wall Street spots or teams, you might be saying, gee, Ron, I noticed there were 3 Democrats and only 2 Republicans. I guess you're just a little soft on the Republicans because there were 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans on your list. Well, here's the deal. It is 2022. And up until very recently, one party had control of the White House, the Congress, and the Senate. It wasn't the Republicans. So it would make sense that when you only have 5 spots to give, if one has to have 3 and one has to have 2, it would just make more sense that the party that has control of all those houses would get the 3 and the other would get the 2. When it's the other way around, I'll have 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, at which time people can accuse me of being too soft on the Democrats and too hard on the blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. But there is my list, folks, for 2022. Top 5 political turkeys of 2022, according to myself.